And I'm the president of the City School District of Albany Board of Education. On behalf of the board, I welcome you to our web-based meeting. It is Monday. Do not be confused. It feels like Thursday, but it is in fact Monday. We are having a special meeting this time to get one more meeting in before the end of the fiscal year. We are so pleased that this model of virtual meetings have allowed many people to be joining us, and we hope that will continue. If you do need to let a friend know how to connect, they can find instructions at albanyschools.org/BOE. Also, our meetings are also always recorded, and the audio files are uploaded a few days after the meeting on our Board Docs platform. So people who can't listen in right now can hear the meeting at their convenience. Meeting by web is part of our effort to ensure that our meetings remain accessible to the public while protecting the health of everyone as we experience this COVID-19 closure. Normally by law, we meet in person, but as a result of Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.1, we may now legally meet by video conference, and we plan to do that until further notice. For any members of the public joining from home, we will show the relevant slides and documents in the virtual meeting screen, and you can also access them via albanyschools.org/BOE. We invite those of you who choose to join us as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which is
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
for all.
for all. In addition to saying the Pledge of Allegiance, we always focus our meeting by restating the mission of the City School District of Albany, which is to work in partnership with our diverse community to engage every learner in a robust educational program designed to provide the knowledge and skills necessary for success. Superintendent Adams, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you so very much. I would like to begin my report tonight, Madam President and members of the board, by recognizing Albany High School Principal Jody Comerford and her team for their outstanding work in planning and executing 16 separate graduation ceremonies under difficult conditions over the weekend. It was absolutely outstanding. We do appreciate all of the board members for coming out and supporting us. The graduation was absolutely fantastic, and we just say congratulations to all of our seniors of 2020. They did an amazing job. As if having to plan a graduation for a third time with less than 2 weeks to do it, that wasn't tough enough. Mother Nature threw us yet another curveball. We did have some rain, but we were able to manage, and within 15 minutes, we were able to move from the outside venue into the gymnasium, and there was very little disruption. This was no easy undertaking with 632 graduates, by far our largest graduating class in well over a decade. But our Albany High team made it look easy, preserving the opportunity for us to celebrate the class of 2020 in an appropriate manner, given the health concerns related to COVID-19. I would like to again thank Principal Comerford for her leadership, as well as everyone who contributed to provide the best graduation experience possible for our seniors. I would also like to thank our students and families for their patience and flexibility as we work to adjust to the circumstances and the weather conditions. It is just another way that we show that we are all in for Albany. It is truly remarkable to see the way that our community comes together to support our students. And we also just have to say thank you to our custodians, our maintenance and operations, our grounds crew, the hall monitors and homeschool coordinators that were there. We're so very, very pleased that the clerical folks came out so that they could assist with distribution of materials. And so it was really nice to see everyone come out and support our seniors. So with Albany High's graduation activities behind us, it's now time to start looking ahead for our summer school programs, which will begin next week. Our general education summer school programs for all students will remain online through Google Classroom this summer. That includes our Summer Newcomer Academy for English language learners. Virtual summer school begins next Tuesday, July 7th for our middle and high school students, as well as students in our Summer Newcomer Academy. Virtual summer school for elementary students will begin August 3rd. In alignment with Governor Cuomo's guidance that school districts may offer in-person summer school for special education students, we will hold our extended school year program at Montessori Magnet School. This half-day program also begins July 7th. We will, of course, follow all appropriate social distancing and health and safety guidelines for all of our students and staff. You can find more information about all of our summer school programs at albanyschools.org. Finally, a reminder that the district will be closed this Friday and next Monday in observance of Independence Day. All of our offices will be closed both days. We will return next Tuesday, July 7th. I wish everyone a safe, relaxing, and enjoyable 4th of July weekend. Thank you very much, and that concludes the superintendent's report. Did I?
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. We now move to the portion of the meeting we call routine consent. During this portion of the meeting, we approve routine matters for the district, including items like contracts, field trips, personnel matters, and the like. Each board member reviews each item carefully, and we vote on them as a group with no discussion. That allows us to use our meeting time more efficiently. Nonetheless, each board member has the option to set aside any routine consent item in order to require a separate discussion and a separate vote on that item. With that introduction, I will now entertain a motion to adopt the routine consent agenda. May I have a motion? Ms. Krejci, and a second? Ms. Smith? Are there any set-asides? Seeing none, all in favor of the routine consent agenda in its entirety? That is unanimous. I note that Ms. Mann is not with us today, so it's a unanimous count of 6. The next item on our agenda is public comment. The board always welcomes input from the community about the decisions we are making. In the past, when we met in person, we set aside this time and people came in person and spoke to us for up to 3 minutes on the topic of their choice. At the very last meeting, I'm proud to say that we adopted an official change to our policy about public comment. And from now on, both when we meet virtually and when we meet again in person after the executive order is rescinded or expires, we will, from now going forward, accept comments by email, phone, and regular mail. Our contact information is available on the district website at albanyschools.org/BOE. No voicemails were received by 4 o'clock today, and 2 emails were received. Ms. Smith, I think you have those emails to read?
Yes, I do, Madam President. The first is from a resident named Stephen. He says, "Good afternoon. I'm writing in regards to the name change noted in the paper. I think this is a mistake and we need to be reminded of the failures and mistakes of the past. Also, question, how much will it cost taxpayers, as some preliminary research has indicated it has cost and perhaps will cost between $50K and $100K. Will there be a meeting to discuss this matter further?" And our second question or comment comes from Mr. Perillo. If I'm saying that correctly. He asked, "Why are we all in favor of removal of all things honoring a revolutionary general, parens, Philip Schuyler, and totally ignoring another, parens, George Washington, who was a known slave owner?" So that, I believe, are the 2 questions that I have from you. And we do, as Madam President said, appreciate all the questions and comments from the public.
Yes, and I would like to make sure everyone knows that in addition to being read out loud, when it appears that the person has a real question, we do also respond, as we did to Mr. Perillo about his question. And we pointed out that our responsibility is to our schools and to our school children. And so the question of the Philip Schuyler Achievement Academy is a very different question for us than one having to do with a theoretical conversation about some school that was named after a different person. We do not deal with the theoretical or the hypothetical. We deal only with the practical which is how it impacts our children in our school district to walk into a school every single day that was named after a person who was an enslaver. Mrs. Adams, did you need the floor for a moment? You're muted.
Thank you so very much. After routine consent, I want to say congratulations to two of our administrators. Suzanne Cornell is going to be the assistant principal at Hackett Middle School. And we are so very excited to announce that Ashley Chappell will be appointed as the director of athletics. And at this time, I believe Ms. Chappell is available for comment.
Thank you, Superintendent Adams. You know, I got to do things a little different. Thank you to the Board of Education, Cabinet, and the community for entrusting me with this amazing opportunity. I decided to do things a little differently and give you a glimpse of who I am. Want a slice, got to roll the dice, that's why all my life I've been grinding all my life, all my life, been grinding all my life, sacrifice, hustle pay the price, want a slice, got to roll the dice, that's why all my life I've been grinding all my life. Who would have thought that the little black girl with ponytails and a dress with sneakers on playing basketball out at Giffen would eventually be named the Director of Health, Physical Education, and Athletics? Who would have thought the little girl who struggled to read and needed assistance with math would become the first Black female athletic director in the city of Albany? Who would have thought in a time when Black men and women are fighting to become and to have the right to wear their natural hair, that this Black woman with braids would be able to become a teacher and now an athletic director? Not me. However, there were people along the way who helped me and encouraged me and mentored me. I know that I am here in this position as the athletic director to represent our community and our students, especially the Black and Brown students. My mission is to provide our students with an education that includes them in our instruction and resources. I plan to provide equitable access and opportunities to our students in sports and athletics. I will be sure to continue to build relationships with our community. It is the grassroots programs like American Little League and the Albany Junior Lady Falcons basketball that has exposed me to organized sports, and I want to do the same for our youth. I want to build relationships with AYB basketball, Albany Youth Soccer, City Lax, Babe Ruth, Westland Hills, Albany Pal Track, Albany Pop Warner Football, 15 Love, and any other sport programs serving our youth. It's time for us to come together and help bring Albany athletics back to being a perennial program it once was. I know all about Tanya Hansen, the Godsteins, the Triple Ds, Lionel Chalmers, and the likes. We are in a great place now, as almost 50% of the top 10 seniors were student athletes. We have more growth, but it will take the community and our coaches working together to make this happen. Before I go tonight, first and foremost, I want to thank my mother, Tony Chappell. She is my biggest supporter. She's very quiet, but I know she is and always will be there for me. It started in elementary school during music concerts when I would slowly play the xylophone and I was terrible at it, but she was still there. To honor roll breakfast at Livingston, to all my basketball games at Albany High School. My mother has supported me in all that I've done, and she will continue to. She has no choice but to support me throughout the rest. But thank you to my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my brother, my cousins, and all the Chappells and Dixons near and far. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Thank you to Dr. Cecily Wilson Turner. She already knows what it is. We've been through a lot. Thank you to all my mentors near and far who have supported me. And thank you to our current athletic director, Kathy Ryan, for taking me under her wing and showing me the ropes. Shout out to all my friends in the community. I love you all, and Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Chappell, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thanks so much, Ms. Chappell. We're happy to have you elevated now to an athletic director, and we are very excited to see how you take your spirit, your school spirit, and your city spirit, and your spirit around kids and what sports can do for them, and bring that to Albany High. We really, and Albany throughout the district. We really appreciate you.
President Savage, you're muted.
That's you, now me. You'd think we'd have gotten the hang of this by now. I was double checking that I had the right order on the agenda. We have a small action item, which is the North Albany Middle School transition that we talked about last time. I'm noting, however, that the action item, I hadn't really noticed this before, it's not specified on the agenda. We really need to pull up the one from last time when we discussed it in order to move that forward. Where is it? Middle school configuration discussion. I think the way we can do that probably easiest way is to bring this this memo forward to tonight's agenda, and then we will just have a resolution to adopt the new enrollment pattern for next year as described in the memo. So can I entertain a motion to adopt that new feeder pattern as described in the memo? And I'll ask Ms. Bowie to move the memo forward. Motion by Ms. Krejci, second by Ms. Smith. All in favor? That is unanimous times 6. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then the next item is a discussion item, which is the discussion. Wait, I'm on the wrong. Hang on a minute. I was wrong. I was on last week's meeting because I was double checking what we were voting on. The next is a discussion item as well, which is the capital project update. I draw to your attention that that is the, oh no, did I forget something? Dr. Chator is shaking his head. What did I forget? No, good. Is a discussion item.
COVID-19? Oh, yes.
Did we? No, I missed that, didn't I? I'm sorry. Things are in a little different order than usual, and I'm floundering a bit. Yes, that is what we missed. Thank you. So, Mrs. Adams, you have a COVID-19 operational presentation for us? I apologize. That was my error.
I do. It is very brief, very brief. So as we come to the conclusion of where we are in this space of COVID-19, we are still making sure that as we move into summer school, we are looking at our vision, our mission, and our goals. I thought that it was important to note, and just as a reminder at this point, that we will have summer school. We will be working with our students with disabilities in both an online format as well as in person. Those opportunities will be offered for our students. We will also have our elementary students will come in a little bit later, and then virtually for our middle and our high school students. I think it's really important as we focus on our goals that we are ensuring that we are looking at increased student achievement. We've seen that even through COVID-19, we've been able to connect with students that had not ordinarily connected. They were connecting in an online format. Our teachers have looked at different ways of delivering instruction and enhancing their own practice. Our leaders have been able to lead in a different way, not necessarily in person, but through our virtual meetings and virtual accountability processes. Many of our families have expressed that there's now a very special connection with their children in terms of the assignments and being able to email teachers and talk with their teachers. And we've also been able to develop some really good partnerships and enhance some partnerships with our diverse community. And so even though this may have been a difficult time and a challenging time, we are able to look back and see the silver lining. And so as always, the purpose of this particular presentation is to make sure that all the steps that we take in response to reducing the spread of COVID-19 in the school district are explained to the board as well as to our public. Some other highlights that we have for COVID-19, through our continuity of instruction plan, we've looked at how we've been able to enhance distance learning and look at how to even do those project-based learning activities and CTE programs through a distance learning model. And we will continue to look at how we balance that as we move forward. The distance working, we are looking at what our reentry plan will be for bringing people back to the offices, as well as what does it look like when we are back in school. We've learned a lot from the perspectives in online learning. And, you know, at first, when you start to watch those, and if you watch them throughout, you'll see that transition of this was kind of difficult, but we were able to work it out. And then by the end, there's a whole different perspective about learning online. Our food distribution, we are over 353,000 meals that were served during this particular time. And as you know, we looked at revamping our maintenance and operations department and how we go about cleaning and sanitizing our buildings. We've been able to get to all of our buildings and also engage in some of the small projects that we need to do. But as we get ready to open schools, we are still looking at what are those procedures that we're going to need to continue throughout the school year as we move forward. When we talk about our academic planning for the 2021 school year, we are still looking at how do we access Google Classroom, because we never know what's going to happen. What this has really taught us is that being able to make that shift to an online environment, we need to be ready for that. So how do we then truly have a blended learning model with that in-person component, looking at what some of the different models may be as we move forward? When we talk about operations and we look at what will that screening be, we already are seeing some of those guidelines come forward that prior to entering buildings, everyone will need to be screened. So we will be looking at different methods for that. What does it look like? We have ordered the touchless thermometers so that we will be able to use those. We're looking at an app that our employees can use for self-checking. So if you've been to the doctor lately, you know that for the most part, you check in on your phone, and then when you get to the facility, then the screening of your temperature is taken. And then based on what that is, then there are decisions that entity would make. And so we have to look at what that means in terms of a school. We know what it means in terms of a business world, but we have to look at what does that mean in terms of a school? And those become some of those challenges that we work through. And of course, maintaining the cleaning and sanitization guidelines from the Department of Health. Transportation right now, as we are going through those plans, that is going to be one of our biggest challenges, and we know that. The limitations right now as it stands with the numbers of students that could potentially be on a bus is much less than what we are accustomed to. So how many routes are we going to have? Would we have enough drivers, et cetera? And then when we look at CDTA, what does that mean in terms of our tripper buses and how many students can be on those buses? And what types of routes would we have? We don't have answers for that right now. I just wanted to make sure that you know that of all the things that we are working with and all the complexities that we are going through, transportation right now is one of the things that not only here in Albany, but districts across the capital region, we're all facing those same things with what those transportation guidelines are going to be. And so that's our update, and I would open it up for any questions.
Board colleagues, any questions for Mrs. Adams?
Yep. I'm sorry. Is that Mr. Adams or me? Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, who did you call on?
I called on Vicky. How about Vicky, then you?
Okay, sorry. So I know this gets said quite a bit, but I just have to say it again. I really just want to echo kudos to the superintendent, cabinet, and all staff. This is and students and families. Again, this has been like an unbelievable, year, and I think the hard work on everyone's part has just been so important, and it mattered. So again, I just want to express my appreciation, and not that I didn't feel it before, but I especially felt it being at the graduation and seeing all of everything in progress. The operation was moving from outside when it rained to back inside, and you not only did that on Saturday, but you did that on Sunday, and it was just an incredible process. And so just kudos to everyone. And I hope everyone can get a little bit of a breather through the summer. I think not, because you're already moving for the coming year, but and summer school, of course. But again, just really very grateful to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Almignali.
Thank you, Vicky. I was actually going to say something about the graduations. It's my first time attending an Albany High School graduation, and I could see the happiness and the relief in so many of the parents' eyes that they actually got to do this, and it means the world. I mean, my neighbor just graduated, and his mom was talking to me about it every single day. What are you guys going to do this? Are you guys going to do this? So great job on that, and great job throughout the year. It's been an incredible year. About the transportation for next year, has administration started talking to our transportation provider about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and do we have like a time frame as to when we need to have these things laid out?
So we have our goal of, we're looking at mid-July, having some resolve with regard to what we may need to do, but it all depends on the type of guidance that we get. So right now, as we're working on what does that guidance look like, if you remember, we started with only 10 people could be in a room at a time. That's now changed. We're going into phase 4 beginning Wednesday. It's up to 20 or 25 that can be in an area maintaining social distancing. Well, that changes the game plan for us right then and there, because now in our classrooms, we're blocking out space that's 6 feet apart to determine how many students can actually fit in a classroom. Do we need to move some of the cubbies out? Do we need to move the carpets? Do we need to move some of the chairs and the tables that are in there? We don't know that yet, because we are in the process of looking at the space. And if we set the desks out and space them 6 feet apart, how many can we fit? And as you know, learning spaces are different sizes. So there may be one learning space that, just based on the shape of the room, you might be able to have 20 students in that classroom, 6 feet apart, maintaining social distance. But in other spaces, it may be 15. And then do we look at dividing the cafeteria and using that as a learning space? Do we divide the gym and use that as a learning space? So there are multiple pieces to the puzzle with regard to that. And so the reason I explain that is because that has a direct impact on transportation. Because if my social distancing allows for, say, 50% of the capacity of the building to be in the building, that doesn't mean that that same 50% is going to be allowed on the bus for transportation, looking at social distancing on a bus. So there's a disconnect there. And so we are looking at how many routes we are running now. I know that Mr. Lesko has been working with Mr. So, who is our transportation director. And so he has been working with First Student as well as with CDTA to look at what types of combinations might we need in place based on the numbers of students that we can house on the buses.
Thank you.
Dr. Turturro.
First and foremost, I want to echo the statements of my colleagues about the graduation. It was just so heartwarming to see. I mean, a lot of these families, these kids were the first generation getting out of high school. The enthusiasm, the pride that was there was just amazing, and the pride in all the staff, because they wanted to be there and see these kids, reach that milestone. That was really great. With regards to bringing back COVID, I mean, people after getting back to school, I have no idea how this is going to be done, because the challenge, I think, is it's probably easier to send man to moon than figure out all the complications of. I mean, when it worked in the first instance, everybody was working from home, or mostly everybody was working from home because there was somebody to watch over the kids. We have people going back to work, so who's going to watch the kids? If you had to wear a mask, well, think about your own kids when they were in elementary school with runny noses. Well, that fall is coming, right? How do you get them to keep their mask? It's so many challenges. I mean, so I can't even imagine the pressure that's on you guys to figure this out in such a short time. Um,
Well, we appreciate it. I do want you to know, I could have included this and I'll say it now, just so that you know, we are in the process of ordering the PPE that's needed for various scenarios. So we are looking at face shields because there are some people that medically they cannot wear a mask. And so we're looking at the face shields. There's some people that need to wear a face shield and a mask depending on what they're dealing with. And so we're looking at how many gowns do we need, because based on your role in the district, you may need to have a gown over your clothing because of the responsibilities that you have. I've already said, but we have ordered the touchless thermometers. We're working on that. We definitely have the gloves, sanitizer. We have all of the sanitizer and cleanser cleaning supplies, and we just keep that stocked so that we are ready to move forward. Understanding the frequency of the cleaning is something that we have to really embed as our practice, and it just becomes the way that we do business. And so, you know, those of you were at the graduation, you were able to see that in real time, that as those students were able to come forward, we had our crews come through so that they could sanitize the chairs for the next group of students to come in. And so those are the things, that's one of the reasons why in the guidance, it does ask us to limit the movement of students, because every time someone moves from one point to the next, you have to clean and sanitize that space. And so we have to look at, you know, how feasible is that? Because, you know, what does that entail? How many people do we have on staff to even to accomplish that? And so you're right. There are a lot of things that we have to look at, but those are the things that we're considering. And I think I have to thank our CAP region BOCES, because we have been working with different plans from all over the country and looking at what may work for us holistically. The Governor's Advisory Council, we are examining what's happening in different parts of the country so that we can develop what will work for us here in New York. And it's really refreshing to see that other states have the same ideas that we have, and they're facing the same challenges that we have. Because at least we can learn from some of the things that they're doing.
Like others, I want to make a positive comment about graduation. I really loved it. It was really, truly heartwarming. I really appreciated it. And in particular, I wanted to note how beautiful I thought it was to have the families cross the stage with their student. I thought that really meant a lot, particularly to our first generation graduates. Some of those parents didn't graduate. And so for them to walk with their student who they supported throughout their public school education, I thought was really touching. And just because, in case anybody isn't already feeling a little weepy, I just wanted to tell a little story about the very first or maybe second graduation. I was at the first two on Saturday, and there was a child there who came by themselves. They came with no family support whatsoever. And I noticed it, and the principal noticed it, and she said, just sort of under her breath to me, I don't think he's got anybody with him. Now, I lost track of what was happening then, but I knew she knew the child. And the next thing I know, as the child is crossing the stage, the homeschool coordinators, one male and one female, walked with him. Nobody in the audience necessarily even knew that that was not his family, but it was such an indication to me of the support that they noticed that he might feel awkward crossing by himself when everybody else was crossing with family, and they just made it happen. And I thought that was so touching, and I really appreciated it. I do have a little bit of a question. If you could just remind us, because I know that we have a reopening committee meeting. I know we have the survey that went out to parents. I'm interested, first of all, in how the response rate has been to that survey, and also what other opportunities you have planned for public comment on this. And if you have any kind of a sense of the timing, and I know we can't make any decisions until the governor speaks, but what our timing process is for those opportunities for public comment, because I know people are getting pretty edgy and antsy, especially as they're seeing, Southern schools that generally open earlier are already announcing their plans. And so they know we can't answer their questions, but they just want to understand what the process is to get to an answer. And so I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
So we have the surveys upon closing that has gone through Ms. Bechtel's office, and so we will be compiling those results. The next step is we will establish sort of like the town hall meetings that we did, and we'll have an opportunity for parents to chime in. We'll be able to take some comments. We'll have some students, we'll do a student forum as well. So we'll be able to do that and get just the feedback so that we can share out, here's what our community feels, thinks, and believes. And then we'll match that up with our committees, because as you know, we have an elementary, middle, high school committee, and most of that work will happen through those committees, but that will be forthcoming. This last week was spring break, so people did actually take a break. And so then we will be gearing up this week and the next week so that we can make sure that we hear from our families.
So we would expect to be seeing that information coming out sometime in the next couple of weeks, that people would
Correct.
know what was going to happen.
Correct.
And as part of that, I imagine you've already thought about this, but I'm getting questions from people who are trying to figure out, I don't know why these people are so busy right now, but they're trying to figure out their schedule for the end of the summer in terms of elementary to middle and middle to high transition process, and whether those processes are going to look like they have in the past. And of course, I know we don't know the answer to that. I'm just floating it that that's something that people are starting to look.
That is
at
something that each committee is looking at. What is that transition going to be going into middle, going into high school? That will be looked at through those committees.
Got it. But the budget, in terms of budget, because I know we were so tight on budget, the budget for whatever we've done for elementary to middle transition, which I know we really bulked up that process, the budget is still in place to do what we've done in the past?
Yes, but it may look differently.
Because of COVID, of course,
Mhm.
yes. I just tried to make sure it wasn't a fiscal issue.
No.
Okay. Those were my key questions on the COVID thing. Anybody else have any COVID operational updates, questions? Okay, then I think we're ready to go on to the heart of the meeting. And the reason we're meeting on Monday is the capital project update.
So thank you so very much, President Savage, members of the board. At this time, I will turn the time over to Ms. Roaring, who is our Deputy Superintendent of Business and Finance, and she will introduce our guests as they talk about Phase 3 of Albany High School rebuild.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. Good evening, Board of Education. This evening we have with us Mr. Rich Peckham from CS Arch, who is our primary architect for the Albany High Reconstruction Project, as well as Mr. John Dawes from Turner, who serves as our construction manager for this project. And I will turn the time over to Mr. Peckham to share some information with you all.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Roaring, Superintendent Adams, and the Board of Education. We're pleased to be able to provide this update this evening. And as we go through it, there's some things we'll be asking the board to provide feedback, comment, and direction on. So just starting out, I wanted to just kind of go through the agenda for what we are going to review tonight. We'll do a review of the bid status. We'll talk about some previous scope refinements that were done as we worked through the process of moving the project through design development and the construction documents phase. Talk a little bit about what we've done with the bidders and what's called the bid de-scoping process since the bids were open. Talk about some possible scope adjustments to align the project with the budget. Give a little more detail on the budget review, and then talk about some next steps as far as where we need to go with this project from here. So overall, we had very competitive bids for the project. The site work contract, we had 5 bidders. Just as a reference, phases 1 and 2, we only had 2 or 3 bidders for that contract. General construction, we had 6 bidders. The other phases, we had 3 to 5 bidders. Plumbing, we had 4 bidders. That's about what we had in the other phases. Mechanical, that's the only contract where we had 4 bidders, which was less than what we had in the other the other projects. One reason for that is this is a larger phase than phase two, and it gets more complicated when you get into renovation work than it is when it's like new construction, which was predominantly what phase one was. Electrical, we had 5 where we only had 3 bidders previously. In fire protection, there's really 2 bidders in this area that bid public work, and they both continually bid all phases of the work. So as you can see, the competition was there for the project. Some people may be asking whether COVID-19 had an impact on the bids. There's really not a specifically defined cost that can be assigned to that. There probably is some impact relative to some social distancing and cleaning of tools and equipment that the contractors have to do, but it's not really a defined cost. And the bids are over the allocated budget for this work, but we feel that they're very competitive based on the number of bids and the scope. And we'll talk about some of the details of where the bids are at a little later in the presentation. But it should also be noted that the bids came in actually under where Turner was estimating the bids would come in at. We knew we had a little bit of a budget cost overrun at the estimate, but felt with the competitive bidding and controlling of that we would hopefully receive bids that were on budget. So when we completed the design development estimate about a year ago now, it was determined that the scope had grown and the estimate had grown to be beyond where the budget was at that point in time. So we looked at it hard at that time and just wanted to bring the board back to the list of items or review the list of items which were modified at that point in time to get us within the budget that we were at then. So we kind of realigned the scope to take out some things that had been requested but really weren't part of the original referendum. And that was the Little Theater, the renovation of the existing music rooms under the auditorium into specific theater support spaces, significant locker room renovations, and relocated security office area from where it was to phase 2. We reduced the front lobby and dedicated art gallery space, including eliminating the open stair between the auditorium lobby and the balcony access. We decided to reuse the existing elevator in the classroom building instead of building a new one, which was going to be cut into the structure of the existing building. Space that had been requested for second floor team rooms, we're just leaving as open rooms without toilet rooms or special finishes. We simplified the exterior wall materials and detailing and changed the type of masonry and used some more ribbed metal panels. Modified the detailing of the auditorium ceiling and acoustical treatments, and we changed to vinyl composition tile in hallways. We changed some of the structural systems and how the retaining wall and foundation system was designed. Instead of raising the floor in the old boiler room, we ramped down the fitness center and dance studio. Some of the CTE equipment for the automotive program at Brooklyn, we relocated that instead of purchasing new. We eliminated the dedicated elevator from the stage to the lower level. We modified some ceiling materials, changing from linear metal ceilings to acoustical panel ceilings. We provided more economical auditorium seats. As we've talked previously, we eliminated the indoor running track since the district now has one at North Albany Middle School. And we deferred the fit out of the TV studio to phase 4 because at the point in time we were developing the project, the district did not have an assigned instructor that was really focusing on that program. So we felt that was important to really have some instructor input to be able to do that. So the total estimated savings of those changes that we made at the end of the design development phase is approximately $11 million. As I mentioned, we talk about the de-scoping process that we did with the contractors. So what is that? We have a meeting with the contractors. But the first thing is to make sure that they have the whole scope included in their bid. sometimes, and I think it's happened a couple times in contracts here for the high school, contractor will have missed something or misinterpreted something in the documents, and therefore they've withdrawn their bid. In this case, we went through this de-scoping process with the contractors, and none of the contractors identified anything they had missed and would imply that they would need to withdraw their bid. We also, in the de-scoping process on projects where we are over budget, we discussed ways that the job could be modified to save costs. So the contractors have given us some ideas there. And in addition to contractor suggestions, the project team between the architects, the construction managers, and the district look at other ways that we could save costs associated with the project. So now we want to talk about some of those potential changes, and all of them are looked at to say, what can we change without impacting program space? So when we look at the site work contract, some of the things that we're proposing to be accepted to look at is to redesign the landscaping. This is one of the things that Mrs. Roaring brought up because I'm concerned about the maintenance of landscaping and wanted to look at it to get it to lower maintenance, particularly with the budget trials you've been having and the fact that that may not be able to be staffed appropriately. And we all know that when you have poorly maintained landscaping, it does not provide a good impression at the entrance to the school. We're going to remove the temporary flagpole. That can be done by the district. We have an exterior guardrail on top of a retaining wall, which we're going to change. Right now, it was bid as stainless steel. We'll change that to a powder-coated steel finish. There's some bollards, and these are around the dust collector for the building trades program. We change those from stainless steel to steel with a plastic cover. We're going to change and modify an architectural privacy fence from a special fence to a chain link fence with privacy strips. We'll remove the masonry from a planter wall at the entrance. It'll just be a concrete wall. And we revise some concrete walks. The potential savings from those changes is $170,000 based on current information from the contractors. Then we looked at things for the general construction contractor. And the top group are things that were items for more discussion and more information that were, some of these we'll look in more detail at some renderings of tonight as far as things for the board to consider. Some of them are things that we may need to come back with more information on. One is to modify the exterior glazing, and we'll look at some renderings of that. Reduce some ceiling acoustical panels and building trades in the auto shop. Change finished material details in the media center. We'll look at some renderings on that. Change the size of porcelain tile from 24 by 48 to 12 by 24. The 24 by 48 floor tile is the tile that you're all familiar with. It's in the corridor that's between the gymnasium and the courtyard area of the Phase 1 addition. When you're putting in floor tile that large, you need to put in a recess in the floor slab and then a special setting material to set that in. If we reduce that size to 12 by 24 of the same tile of the same color, then you would be able to eliminate that slab recess and a lot of the labor that goes along with installing tiles like that. Reduce glazing sizes in the main lobby. There's some glazed openings into some adjacent spaces in the main lobby. If we reduce that, there'd be some savings. And eliminate all the side lights to classroom doors. In Phase 1, we have about a 2-foot section of glass next to the classroom doors. And that is, sometimes we find that the teachers cover that up anyway. And so we're talking about potentially that could be a savings to reduce that. So those are the things that we want to have more discussion on, see about how the board feels about those. In the items that we're proposing to accept, that we've worked through with district administration, is to eliminate side lights in the 2R rated walls and CTE. Because of the fire rating, it makes those side lights considerably more expensive than normal side lights. Talking about changing specifications on physical education flooring. Really, this is just going with a different manufacturer that can provide very similar products at a reduced cost. There's a furring system behind the masonry veneer that's not required that we can take out. We're looking at an alternative furring system behind the exterior metal panels than what was used in phase 1 and phase 2. We'll change the manufacturer of vehicle lifts to Rotary, which is a manufacturer that is some of the lifts that you already have that will be moved over. Delete cleaning at substantial completion. We had put in the specs for the contractor to completely clean the building at substantial completion and then clean the building again at final completion. Since the intent is that we're not going to occupy any spaces except at final completion in this phase, it was felt that we could delete the cleaning at substantial completion. And then change the density of spray fireproofing. The harder finish that was specified really isn't required when it's concealed above ceilings or behind walls. So the bottom part of that list adds up to about $324,000 in savings, including those items. If we added in the top items, a couple of them we don't have complete pricing from the contractor yet, it would be over $500,000 total savings, not additional savings for that top list, but total savings. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the proposed changes or potential changes to the exterior of the building. So this is the rendering we showed previously that shows the exterior as the project is currently bid. And some of the things we're going to focus on is the amount of glazing at the principal's office area at the entrance, and also some glazing on the north end of the classroom wing. So this, and we'll look at this in a little closer view, but on the left-hand side, we're changing from basically a complete glass wall to a wall that has some individual windows in it around the main office area, and reducing the glazing that's at a third floor corridor that comes across between the classroom wing and the auditorium on arts wing. This is just a view looking in the other direction of the way the project is bid. Again, towards the left-hand side of that view, you can see the full glass of the office, which in this view now is changed to, excuse me, a wall with a couple windows in it, and the reduced glazing is to have complete glazing across the third floor corridor to make that some windows with metal panels between. And then on the right-hand side where it says to ship that 3-story curtain wall at the stair is removed, and metal panels with some windows in it would be added instead. So this is just that view as what's designed. You can see toward the middle of the right-hand portion there, the curtain wall, and then the change to the metal siding with the windows and the door and the masonry below. And then again, on the left-hand side of that, changing it to some window area and then metal panels between what was completely glazed previously. Again, then this is the main entrance close up as it's currently designed. And you can see how essentially towards the left-hand side, that was all glazing. And now this proposal has it being smaller windows and a masonry wall. And then in the middle there, you see where we say storefront removed at stair 3-1. That is not meant to be an entrance. That is more an exit stair. So actually changing that to a masonry wall with doors with less glass reduces the attraction of that, people thinking that's an entrance also, because we really want people going through the entrance to the right, which is the secure entrance where they'll go through the screening process. So that's kind of the exterior at the front of the building. One of the other items we talked about was changing out some of the acoustical ceiling panels in auto tech and in building trades. On the left-hand side of this, you'll see the gray shaded areas, which are where we're installing a material called Tectum, which is a sound absorption material in the on the ceiling. Because of the noise in the space, we got two things we're trying to do. One is to prevent transmission of sound between this space and the space above, which these panels that are shaded in gray is not part of that system. That's done with a double layer of gypsum board and insulation. These are for absorbing any sound in the space. And the amount you see on the right, which is proposed change, is the amount of sound absorption that's really necessary in the space. What we ended up putting in the bid documents was more for an aesthetic thing and having a more continuous appearance of the sound absorbing material in the space, but it can all be the same color anyway. The gray is just to identify what the area is and not the actual color of it. Similar situation in building trades, and you can see here all that other material and almost like spider work below the ceiling is actually duct work for the dust collection system. So you have a lot of things happening below the acoustical panels to start with, and this would provide the right-hand solution would provide appropriate acoustical treatment for the space. Next area that we just wanted to talk about is options for doing some cost reductions is in the media center. And the main things we want to talk about here is what you see at the far end, which is a wall that is finished in what's called a wood wall covering, essentially. So it's a wood veneer material that's applied over the wall surface with some reveals in between it. And then on the foreground to the right and on the far wall to the left, there are some panels applied to the wall just for aesthetic purposes to break up the size of those walls because they're relatively large blank walls otherwise. So to be able to make some changes here, we could do something with the wall with the wood on it and change it so that it's just the drywall that would be painted and eliminate those decorative wall panels that are breaking up those larger walls to save some costs. And we did a couple options as far as what the colors could be for that wall at the far end and how some colors could change. These are just possibilities. We could go with something with more color on that wall if we want to, if the board's open to the idea of eliminating the wood and going with a color or something more to give some accent to that wall. So the next couple slides just give a couple options that don't go that far with the color, but just go with accent walls, the acoustical fabric panels that are on the upper part of the wall would be white. The accent wall could be white. You could have dark and light gray walls as accent and the general walls in that space. Or the next option actually has the white accent walls and then actually changing the gray fabric panel or the white fabric wrap panels out to gray to make it more of a monolithic appearance on the walls of the upper part and bring the color into the seating and the chairs and the rest of the space for the media center. And then there's another option to make the wall, instead of making it the wood, making it a darker accent color. As I said, this is kind of more of a gray scheme. We could actually put, a blue in there or some other accent color also as an option instead of the wood. So then this is another part of it that was that wood wall covering material, but in this case it was essentially on the ceiling where you enter into the media center. right by the circulation desk. That part of the ceiling was going to be wood in the base design that's been bid. The next slide, couple slides show a couple options as far as how the could be a white material, more traditional ceiling color material on the underside of that one-story ceiling space. The next slide just makes it as if it's a darker charcoal color on the entrance there. So that's kind of the general construction proposed options that we've looked at to date. A couple other potential changes that have come out from the mechanical and electrical contractors. On the mechanical contract, there was one option to basically change the type of duct insulation for the ductwork that's installed on the roof. Unless you're flying your drone or flying over the building, you'd never see this. In phase 1 and 2, we used a double wall insulated duct, which was fabricated in a factory. The contractor says we can save about $65,000 on this phase if we went with a ductwork that is actually insulated in the field after they install the ductwork and then wrapped with a waterproofing material around it. The electrical contractor came back and said, made some proposals to potentially modify the auditorium sound system on some of the functions and equipment of that. That list has been provided to the district, and they're going to review that internally to see if any of that makes sense. There were some potential light fixture substitutions or changes that the contractor proposed that could save some money. One of the things we're looking at there is the specific fixtures to make sure we wouldn't have a drastic change between phases 1 and 2 and other phases on an appearance standpoint. And then one that there's some potential on is saving some money for some of the cabling systems that are above the ceiling, instead of actually putting them in conduit pipes, just having them suspended on hooks above the ceiling, which is some of what we've done in certain areas in phase 1 and 2. And there's one other item here is to do a cabling modification to kind of align with the updated district standard on the technology cabling to the teacher station and the monitors at the beginning of the front of the school. That one's about $15,000. The other three there, if we were able to take them, would add up to about $151,000 total between all of those items. A couple other things that we can look at from a budgetary standpoint. Phase 4, which we haven't gotten to yet, has a couple items where the current scope of what was drawn and what Turner has estimated was more extensive than what the pre-referendum scope had planned for. One of them was to resurface the outdoor running track instead of fully digging it out and reconstructing it. And the other one was the concession stand, storage, field toilets out at the field, entrance area to the field, scaling that back to the budget that we had maintained in the referendum for that scope of work. Savings on both of those, if we said that we were going to commit to those changes and scale that back and bring that money forward to phase 3, would be $680,000. And the last item here just to talk about, and the people that were on the board at the time a couple years ago, we'd come to the board with a proposal for having a company called Multivista come in and do photo documentation of the building as it was being constructed, so that down the road there'd be documentation of what's inside the walls, behind the walls, above the ceilings, in the ground. If we were to decide to stop that documentation after phase 2, we'd have potential savings of about $132,000. So where does that leave us? So I said we'd look at the overall budget status. The current total of the bids is $46,131,000. We're maintaining a construction contingency of 7.2%, which is $3,315,000. There's some items that are being purchased from state contract, so they're not in the contractor's bids, but need to be done as part of the project. This includes your temperature control system to make sure you're consistent throughout the building. Things like the PA, the fire alarm system, and the PA, the fire alarm, and the security cameras, card access system, intrusion detection. Current proposals from the state contract vendors on those is $1,680,000. So the total projected construction costs are $51,126,000. And the current phase 3 construction budget is $49,140,000. And that leaves us a budget amount over the original estimate or actually over the original budget of $1,986,000. So if we look at where all those other things we looked at total up to, and one other thing that's on this, couple things on this list that we haven't talked about yet tonight is the proposed contractor scope reduction values that we feel we should move forward with is $509,550. Some of those other ones that we're looking for some dialogue from the board and more input and more research on, those potentials would add up to $387,900. One of the things we have is we have a $4.5 million total budget for furniture, fixtures, and equipment in the budget. Right now, our detailed budgets for those are only adding up to about $4 million. We have to do some further vetting on that, but we feel there's about $500,000 from that furniture, fixtures, and equipment budget that could be rolled over to the construction budget. And then in phase 1 construction contingency, we're basically getting very close to the end of any cost for phase 1. We feel there's about $75,000 from the phase 1 construction contingency that can roll forward for use in the rest of the project. We just talked about the potential phase 4 budget reduction, really scaling those scopes back that were greater than what they were pre-referendum. It's $680,000, and the potential for the multi-vista photographic reduction of $132,000, which if you took all of those would give you $2.284 million compared to the overrun currently of a little over $2 million, which if you took all of those, you'd be about $300,000 to the good on the overall budget. So that is where we're at. I'll ask John or Kimberly if there's anything you want to add that I didn't cover that I may have missed.
So this is John Dawes with Turner Construction. Rich, I think you did a good job explaining all that. I think you pretty much hit it all. We do have a little bit of work to do on our end, narrowing down some of these numbers with the additional scope reductions that Rich talked about with some of the contractors. I've been in touch with them daily, so numbers keep coming in. So once we get that, we will share that with Kimberly and the rest of the team. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So I think that brings us now to questions. Mr. Baker, can I ask you to slide us all the way back to the very, very beginning? Because I know that my colleagues have so many questions about this and questions of all types, shapes, sizes, and concepts. And I think the only way we're going to be able to get through this without getting terribly confused is if we do it sort of in order. So if you go to just the next slide, number 3, this slide gives us sort of the overall process, right? This is how we kind of got here. And so I would like to start, if my board colleagues are willing, with a conversation about the overall process and how we got here, because this is obviously not a place we wanted to be. So I'd like to ask all of those questions first, and then we will move on to asking sort of slide by slide any detailed questions we have. And as I often do, I remind my board colleagues that our process is that we ask one question sometimes one with a little follow-up, but generally we're going to try and do one question so that everybody gets a turn to ask their most pressing question before we go on to your second most pressing question. And we'll do that through our, as we walk through these different slides and these different chunks. And again, as I often or almost always do, I'd like to give the first question to the chair of the facilities committee, since I know that Vicki has spent a tremendous amount of time working on this project in her role, in that role. So Ms. Smith, do you have a question about slide 4, loosely interpreted to mean the overall process of how we got?
Yes, thank you. First, Mr. Peckham, thank you. Mr. Dawes, thank you. First, I just want to express this. I'm very concerned, a little perturbed, if you will, about receiving this amount of information just today. And I understand that it was a process to, sit down with the bidders and go through that process. But this was a lot to absorb tonight, and there were some details that were just were a little bit unexpected. And I think I speak for my colleagues particularly on the facilities committee, that we're a little bit concerned about that and a little upset about that. And so I want to say that. I want to also specifically have you address a bit more about how we actually got here. Was there something wrong with the estimates? Did the designs, were they far more than the estimates? Why were we not getting this level of information earlier? And so it would help me a lot to have those questions answered first. And particularly, I'm going to say, as chair of the committee, really, really wanted to have had an opportunity to vet this out with the committee. So, Mr. Peckham, thank you. And again, I want to just express that I have learned a great deal from all of you and others, particularly on the committee. And so I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I'm a little perturbed, and I just want to get some answers about why and how we got here. Thank you.
The process of getting from documents to contracts is always a stressful process. On bid day, we're always hoping that bids are coming in on budget, and we rely on the best information that we have from the cost estimators from Turner and working with them. So we knew that once we completed the construction documents estimate, that we were still a little bit over budget, but we felt that because we carry a design contingency and an escalation number at that point in time, that we had worked through at that point in time as much of the detailing of the project that we felt comfortable with or knew about at that point in time to get a project that was on budget. And as we worked from that final estimate to getting it out to bid, we were very conscious to keep within the parameters of the design that we were working in to keep it within budget. The fact that bids came in over budget but under estimate just shows that that spread with the design contingency and the escalation, we used up more of that part of the estimate than we were hoping for when we went out to bid.
That was quite significant. That wasn't a little bit, that was significant.
Well, it's $2 million is obviously a significant number. On a project of 45 million, $50 million, it's as a percentage in the construction industry, it's not as significant as you might think, in that I'd have to go back and look at exactly the numbers we were carrying for the design contingency and the escalation at that point in time, but it was over $2 million combined between those two.
Ms. Wilson, did you have a question you wanted to add on?
Yes, well, essentially, Board Member Smith asked my question in a way about essentially how the estimates came to be sort of something that we didn't have a concrete understanding of. So I'll ask a different question about moving forward. Either A, how could you have had like a stopgap in place to prevent that from happening, or how will you put one in place moving forward?
Well, I think that moving forward for any future phases, probably need to consider doing something that a lot of districts do in bid situations, and that is to see if there's anything that can be bid as an alternate. We did bid a couple alternates in this phase, but they were more to see if we could afford adding some things in that were not originally budgeted. But there may be ways to look at, like some of the things that we were talking about here now, as far as potential design changes, could have been bid. Some of them could have been bid as alternates and said, okay, then we'll know exactly what the price is between the two different options, and you can make a decision based on cost if you want to commit the resource to that, or whether you can afford to commit the resources to that. So it's one of those things that alternates can, if you have too many of them on a bid, the bidders start to wonder how you're approaching the bid. So it's always a fine line that we have to work with between the district, the construction manager, and the design team, as far as what's appropriate for alternates to try to contain the volatility in the bid market.
Dr. Chittor?
I mean, this is very concerning. And $2 million in the big scheme of things may not be concerning, but to us it still is. Every dollar matters, especially when taxpayers are paying the money. So, as of in March, we were told that the construction would start in June, and just earlier this month, we were told construction would be starting in July. Obviously, there's been delays. Phase 1 was delayed. Phase 2 seems to be it's delayed. Phase 3 looks like, well, we are not even sure when it would start. What is the reasoning for it? In phase 1, I can understand we broke open the building and there was rusted steel, there's weather, there were other things beyond our control. Phase 2, okay, COVID, I can give it some discount for COVID, but I can't see any reasoning for why papers are not going to ACD on time, why bids are not being submitted on time. Why are we tracking so behind? Forget the cost of it. Even the time is money.
There were a couple factors in why we went out to bid with this a little bit later. One of them was just trying to tie down some loose ends, make sure we had as tight of documents as possible. The other one was when Scott DePhillips was working with potential bidders. There were a couple other big projects out to bid right at the time that we were thinking about putting this out to bid. And so the thought was at that point in time, not to compete with those other projects, but to just shift it. And if the bids had come in on budget, we would have awarded and started the construction in July, because another piece of that was when we got into the real detailed scheduling, there wasn't much work that could start before, not knowing that the building was going to be vacant all this time. There wasn't really much work that could start before the 1st of July, when in theory the students were going to be out of the building.
So I'm going to reflect in this delay in phase 1 on monsoon season. I do understand fully the delay on most of phase 1. We did lose a tremendous amount of time that first summer. That was an astonishing summer in terms of its rain. but talking as Tabitha did about going forward, the thing that surprised me the most about the way you ran this down verbally is that it sounds, if I'm understanding correctly, maybe I'll just check for understanding first. We went out to bid with an architect's estimate that was above what the budgeted amount was. That's correct?
That is correct. Well, the construction manager's estimate, yes.
Construction manager's estimate, thank you. So I guess I would ask that, and I don't know how that conversation proceeded because it was news to me tonight that the documents went out with an estimate where we thought that it was likely that it was going to come in over the estimate, over the budgeted amount, but on the estimate. And I find that troubling, and I do understand about not wanting to have too many ad alternates. I get that. Nonetheless, I really feel like a different conversation should have been had, and maybe the board brought in, and the board tries as much as we can to defer to the experts on these decisions, but to not know that we were going out to bid when that the estimate was higher than we could afford, and we went out to bid without knowing that, I'm troubled by that process. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that piece of it.
Well, as I mentioned, the thinking there was that the contingencies and where we felt the bid market was going at that point in time, and the design was at, that we would not need the entire contingencies that were in the estimate, because Turner estimates the project is what they think it would be, the set of drawings they're looking at if they were to bid it that day that they're finishing the estimate. And then they look at it and say, well, we're not bidding it right now. We're going to bid it, and construction is going to take 2 years. So we got to put some escalation in, and there may be things that get tweaked along the way that may add costs. So they use a design contingency and escalation factor in there. And we just felt that where we were, the reports that we were getting and the experience we were getting in some bids as far as stuff coming in lower than estimate or on estimate, that at the point in time when we were getting this ready to go to bid, we were optimistic that those contingencies would be enough to buffer the bids and bring it in on budget.
I understand. I guess I'm saying in terms of going forward, I would really like to know, I would like the board to know before it goes out, if we're going out at an estimated amount above what we can actually afford. I think that's something we should know. And it should be a discussion, a public discussion. These are taxpayer dollars, and I understand that we cannot control the bidding market, and it came in high and stuff comes in high. But I get the sense that we could have chosen differently, so as not to be trying to make these decisions at the 11th hour, because really we want to be starting construction like soon. And so I feel like we're trying to make these decisions. We could have made them in a more thoughtful and procedural way if they were made earlier in the process. So if you want to respond to that, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just take it as my strong request that for the next phase of this and for any future work you do for us, that we always know, the board always know, and as well as any conversations that are had with committees or staff or whatever. Let's see, does anybody else have either a first question or a second question on this phase? Ms. Creighton?
I guess I just had more of a comment than a question, and it was just, as a former facilities committee member for several years, things like this always used to come through facilities so that they could be discussed at the facility level, kind of digested. I think when there, especially with something with as many moving parts as this, it's really difficult when, first of all, the facilities committee doesn't have time to address it, and second of all, we as a board don't really have time to address it. It seems like with all the delays, I guess I don't understand why this is such a rush to change. It's making me concerned. It's making me concerned about this project in general. And it's upsetting because back in February, it was so great to see that first wing completed. And I just don't want this to go. I don't want this to go, I don't want this to go sideways, so I'm just a bit disappointed right now. That's my comment.
Ms. Smith, I think you had one more.
Yes, and Ms. Krejci, thank you for that one. I also wanted to ask this question around its process, but time in particular. So is it my understanding that, let's see, we have to vote on these contracts, right, by mid-July, somewhere around there? And if not, the pricing expires and we have to restart this process? Is that correct?
The contractors are required by bidding law to hold their pricing for 45 days, which just about corresponds with your July 23rd board meeting. You can go to the doesn't necessarily mean after 45 days you have to, start the process over. You can go to the contractors, and if they voluntarily say, yes, I'll hold my price longer, they can do that, but they're obligated to hold it for 45 days from the date of the bid opening.
And actually, a follow-up question on that, if you don't mind, Ms. Smith. Are they obligated to hold these prices if we subtract work, as it seems clear that we're going to need to do? Must they hold their prices? Or I guess I know you've been in regular contact with them, especially through Turner. Do they intend to hold their prices even as we reduce what looks to me to be 4 to 5% of their estimated work?
All of them seem to want to work with us to be able to do that because they're below bidder and they have a job as long as this goes forward. So I don't see any issues with them holding their prices relative to that goes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
But-
Ms. Smith,
Yes, just one more. I just want to help me understand this too. So can you talk a bit about how the contractor, let's see, so they're making, now we're just modifying some things. Isn't this going to affect the bid? I mean, let me just maybe be more specific. Can you discuss how the contractor had to ask for correct documents, as all these changes were not included? And how are you improving the quality of those documents and then that are created and then shared with the contractor?
I guess I just asked for a clarification. What are you referring to as far as the quality of the documents?
Well, I guess I just want to know how, if we're still making all these changes here, their bids aren't aligned.
Okay, so
So go ahead.
the bids, what we would do, and we need to talk with your legal counsel just to make sure everything's in line, but what we would do most likely is to, similar to what we did on phase 2, is award the contracts for the amount that each individual contractor had bid, and then deduct change orders to modify scope or reduce scope or change scope of what their bids were based on.
Okay, so we would be seeing more change orders. Okay.
anyone else with a question on this sort of how did we get here? What's the overall picture? How does the bidding and contracting work? All of that. Otherwise, I think I want to move on. Mr. Amanyawi, you are unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yes. So I'm just trying to kind of understand this a little bit greater, Rich, so bear with me here. If Tex knew that the estimate was high, wouldn't it have been more prudent to come back to the board and do these design adjustments before going out to bid?
With what we know now, yes, it would have. As I mentioned, at the point in time, we felt that we had modified things to get to where we were at, and that we were optimistic the bid market would come in, because quite often bids do come in underneath estimates, because the estimators aren't necessarily estimating for the low bid. They're more estimating for a median bid. So that's another piece that I didn't mention before, that why we felt a little more comfortable putting it out to bid. But
I see. And I'm just I worry that now that we're going to make these changes, that we may not get as great of a price now that they're having to go back to the drawing board again. Is that a legit concern?
that's a fair statement, that in deduct change orders, you're probably not getting 100% of the value of the change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think the board has made our concerns about the fact that we went out. And yes, we hear your intention to be optimistic. I guess I don't know if I want to make this a question, but I am a little curious about what that optimism was based on. I mean, we've worked with both you and Turner for quite a long time. And Turner has been overall very good at estimating this work. And it sounds like, if I understand you correctly, in fact, the estimation was not the problem. The projects did come in under the estimated work. The problem was that the scope was bigger than we could actually afford. So I just want to make sure that there's no confusion here, or that I'm not confused. It's not that we estimated at this amount and the bids came in here. We estimated here, the bids actually came in slightly under, although I haven't seen these numbers, but verbally, I believe, slightly under the estimate. It's just that our budget was down here and it didn't come sufficiently below the estimate to bring us back into budget. That's correct?
That is correct.
So that's the piece about the process that really needs to not get lost here. It's not that the estimates were wrong. The estimates were pretty much right on, and as we would expect them to be. All right, I'm going to ask that again. How are we on the overall picture? How we got here, estimates, bids, contracts, all that. Are we ready to move on to the details a little bit? Okay, so then I want to move on just to slides 4 and 5. Slides 4 and 5 are, if I'm understanding the presentation fully, they're titled previous scope modifications. So some of this we talked about before, but not most of it we didn't talk about in much detail, with the exception of the track. So let's see if there's any questions. My understanding is that this was scope that was reduced out of phase 3 prior to the bidding. Is that right?
Yes, this is scope that when we received the design development estimate, which is about 50% done with the documents, it was identified at that point in time that Turner's estimates were over the budget, and therefore we went back and looked at it, trying to say why. And some of these, like the first 4 items, were some of the things that were identified that were scope that was not in the original referendum, that somewhere along the line somebody had requested. And then the other ones are just part of the process of refining a design to try to align it with the budget. So.
Madam President, are you speaking?
Yeah, I'm mostly talking to myself. Does anybody have a question on slide 4 or 5 only? These are the prior reductions. Ms. Smith.
Yes. So I just wondered, and maybe it's all here and I'm just not getting it, but could you review all the proposed changes to the auditorium? I get to the bottom line of one of the other slides that says you're estimating a savings of about 11 million, but I'm not sure if, and the numbers aren't here, I'm not sure how we got there. And just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, outlining those changes.
Well, I mean, the cumulative, if you want me to talk specifically about the auditorium, really, as I mentioned, detailing the auditorium ceiling and acoustic treatments, we had a design for the auditorium ceiling that, quite honestly, I'm not even sure it ever made it to the board because we determined it was a design that couldn't be afforded. So we made that adjustment as part of the design process. And then it just adjusted how we dealt with the acoustical treatments in the auditorium to get the proper sound absorption reflection based on the work of our acoustical consultant. So that's really the changes in the auditorium itself at this point in time from these previous scope modifications.
Can you just talk a little bit while you're on auditorium about the reduced elevator? Apparently there was intended to be a dedicated elevator and that's not there now. And I'm just trying to understand programmatically what that means to folks trying to put on a theater production.
Yes, that was my next, yes.
Okay, so there was going to be an elevator dedicated going from the lower level underneath the auditorium up to the auditorium level. That has subsequently been, there's a couple reasons why that was eliminated. One was we were going to build the shaft for that in phase 2 and install the elevator in phase 3 when we did the auditorium work. When we started doing the excavation for the work in the elevator shaft for phase 2, some existing conditions were determined that weren't fully reflected in the documents that were going to actually add some cost to that. It was also determined that we could use that elevator that is on the in the auditorium lobby essentially to be able to move materials up and down without a separate elevator. It probably would not have been used actually during a performance as far as things coming up and down. So it's really a support function for getting materials and props and things up and down. And since we had other options for that, and the floor level of the music rooms that are on that same second floor, but are not at the same elevation as the stage, we took out the elevator, but we put in a handicapped lift so they can still get large music equipment or people from that music level up to the stage direct access from that level.
So how much farther away is this elevator that they're going to be using then? And I wish I was actually just trying to see if I could quickly pull up the schematics for the whole building. I don't know if we can lay hands on those, but I'm trying to understand where this elevator that is going to be used is located versus the one that was intended to be built but is now not going to be.
Well, it depends on, it's around the side of around in the auditorium lobby. So depending on how you're moving something, you would move it from the lower level, either into the lobby and then down the aisles of the auditorium and lift it up onto the stage, or you come around a corridor to bring it into the stage.
Well, I'm not visualizing that, but I'm going to leave that to the facilities committee to try and tackle that question at some point because I can't mentally picture that space. Anybody else have? Oh, actually, while we're still on auditorium, this alternative auditorium ceiling and acoustic treatments, this is going to be sufficient. We have not had the world's best sound in our current Albany High auditorium, and we have a fantastic theater arts program and we want to be able to hear them.
All I would say is that it's not better or worse, it's just different. Between not what you have now and this, between what this was at design development and what we have in the bid documents. It was definitely going to be sufficient for the level of performance and quality of students and staff that you have.
So let me just re-ask that question again, rephrase that question again. So you're saying
ahead,
that
Dr.
what is in the scope right now is better than what is currently in place at Albany High?
Definitely.
Other questions about slides 4 and 5? Mr. El-Minawi, I see you are not.
Rich, can you just explain to me what reducing the art gallery space entails? I mean, can you give me like a square footage reduction?
If you want, I'd have to get back to you with an actual square foot reduction. At design development, we had a dedicated, room that could be locked off as a separate art gallery. Now what we're using is basically being able to display art in the lobby outside the auditorium, balcony, as well as other locations in the building.
That would be great if you could. Thank you.
My last one about this section was the TV studio. I assume that when that scope was moved to phase 4, the money to support that was moved to phase 4.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, Vicky, can you add that to your list of things to follow up? Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that very much. Anybody have anything else on these 2 slides only, which were the previous reductions? Ms. Wilson.
Just not so much a question, but a concern that if we are into phase 3 and we're doing these reductions and eliminations, what about the fidelity with the previous work that's been done? I'm just worried about the continuity and the design, and that it flows from phase 1 through the current phase.
We're going to call that the first question for the next section, which is, we're moving on now to the, and thank you, Tabitha, that's a perfect question to do the segue, but we're going to move now to the next section, which really is the potential changes that have been discussed. And I think Tabitha's question is one we have, all of us have in our minds, which is, how will this flow and will it be a noticeable difference? Mr. Peckham, did you want to speak to that?
Well, I think that we've looked at it as far as being consistent in materials, lighting, and those items to make it so that there isn't a noticeable difference. There are some things, and we can look at them in specific details, like, the side lights next to the doors. Is that going to be something that's noticeable? It's a concern, particularly if teachers are covering them with posters and other materials now. So I guess that's, the overall materials probably are not, I don't think would be a sufficient noticeable difference. I mean, the large format floor tile is another one that people may notice, but the 2 different size tile would never be touching each other. It's not like you're going to walk from the auditorium lobby onto the, gym area between the gym and the courtyard of phase 1 and say, oh, I just walked into a different floor. There's another material. There's the VCT corridor that goes back between those areas before you get to that area. So as far as durability, I mean, you're going to have the same durability regardless of what size the floor tile are. But so that's kind of the way we look at it. Some of the other things is when we really try to maintain that the parts that people see are what you're mainly concerned with. Some of the other material changes, if they're buried above ceilings or in walls or on roofs, may not be as much of an issue if they're different between phase 1 and 2 and then 3 or 4.
Vicky, is your next question continuing this concept of consistency and continuity, or is it a new topic?
Yes. No, it is.
Okay.
It is. So I guess I want to say or ask, confirm the durability question, because so you're saying there's not going to be, is there much difference between the wearability of the tiles we were going to use versus the tiles we're now looking to use. There's also that we were going to use stainless steel for certain things, and now it's going to be that sort of more, I think it was called powdered steel, something. Is there any difference in the wear and tear or the, you know, the longevity of those things?
Stainless steel, if you want to just look at the stainless steel guardrail system, stainless steel is going to be more long-term durable. If it's powder coated, it's a factory finish. It's not like it's a painted finish. So there's a slight difference there. The bollards, quite honestly, the bollards are in front or behind a fence, and we're going to put a plastic sleeve over them so it's not a painting issue for those. As far as the floor tile go, the only difference of durability between the larger ones and the smaller ones, because they're the exact same material, you know, they're exact same manufacturer, color, everything. They're just fabricated in a different size. The only thing that the smaller ones do, there's more linear footage of grout associated with floor tiles if they're smaller than if they're the larger tiles.
So I'd like to just draw our attention back to trying to go slide by slide, just to make sure we don't miss anything. And then we can always circle back at the end. But we're right now, Mr. Baker has put us on the next slide, which is a site work slide. We just talked, oh no, go ahead, go back one, please, Mr. Baker. There we go. This is the first one, right? The first slide under the potential changes. Okay. So let's try as much as we can to just ask any more questions about this. Now, some of what Mr. Peckham just said was responding to this, but does anybody have specific questions about this slide? Dr. Chatur?
I want to go back to Vicky's question about the tiles, which is the previous slide actually. The more junctions you have between the tiles, there's more possibilities for things to get underneath the tiles to lift, and more maintenance issues, right?
It only becomes a maintenance issue if your grout joints start to fail. And with the current grouts that you use and the epoxy grout that we use, failure of grout is not typically a major issue. So it's not like there's a gap, it's filled with the grout, so you're not going to get stuff underneath the tiles itself.
Is there a warranty on that material?
With any product like the floor tile that is installed in the field, your warranty is pretty much limited to the 1-year contract or workmanship warranty. There are some warranties from the products of actual failure of like if they were manufactured wrong or something. But once they're installed by labor in the field, getting more than a 1-year warranty on a material like that's pretty limited.
Okay. So I think floor tiles come up again on another slide as well. So anything on this slide? Mr. El-Menyawi, did you have something on this slide?
Yes, I actually, I had a question regarding the landscaping and the plantings. So, Rich, has your team been thinking about landscaping and planting that will allow the district to be much more hands-off and let nature do its job, and the district do its job of teaching children rather than dealing with landscaping? And if you guys haven't, please do think about the best solutions for low impact, low work landscaping for future administrations and this one.
That has all been a large part of this, and Mrs. Roaring has been very vocal about the fact that everything down to not wanting pine trees that had pine cones that were going to drop and require maintenance staff to pick them up, or have to spend more time with weed whackers instead of just running a lawnmower over things like that. So that has all been one of the focuses as we've looked at redesigning the landscaping at the Washington Avenue side of the building.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready now to move on to the next slide, which is the general construction slide? Actually, wait, maybe I should ask for just a little feedback on this slide before we go there. This site work slide has $170,000 of items proposed to accept. There's been a little discussion here, but in general, I'm not sensing a lot of board resistance to these items, so long as the continuity is maintained and that we don't feel like we're looking at two separate buildings. Is that about how board members are feeling? I see Tabitha, you've got your hand up. Ms. Wilson?
Another concern is basically if it's a savings now, but costly later. Like I'm looking at the prints and the revision of the concrete walks. We wanted to have longevity also because we can't ask for more money down the line.
That's exactly my question. Yeah, and concern.
So if I could just speak for a moment to some of the site work changes that might be helpful, would that be okay?
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. So some of our conversation around the site work changes are really looking at making sure that we're maintaining a welcoming aesthetic, something that is very appealing, but also that complements the front facade of the building. We do want that to be very visible and highlighted, while also making sure that we are doing our best to not create a situation that requires us to have additional time and efforts focused on grounds maintenance, particularly as we address some of our fiscal realities on the operating side. So when we talk about the redesign of the landscaping, for example, we are looking at something that is a little bit more serviceable in terms of that ongoing maintenance, but still providing shade trees, right? And still making sure that we have some plantings of color and things that are just visually appealing and able to be maintained in a meaningful way. The changes that we've talked about in terms of the guardrail and bollards and things like that, I think Mr. Peckham spoke to fairly clearly. They aren't substantive changes in terms of the utility or necessarily in terms of concerns from a maintenance perspective. The concrete walkways, we made a couple tweaks there. One that we made during the bid process was around a color additive that was proposed, and we know that that just yields long-term problems, right? There's maintenance issues associated with that, and making sure, because it fades, right? And it doesn't look fantastic forever. So how would we be able to eliminate some of those kinds of things that may not just create an unsightly situation, but cause us additional funds down the road to do something meaningful to put them back in alignment. So the concrete walkway note here really refers to also making sure as we prepare an accessible entrance that we're doing so in a way that's readily navigable and not creating unnecessary complexities to that design element that would cost us more money to implement and more money to maintain as we move forward. So I hope that helps provide some clarification around those things, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Ms. Smith?
Sure, Ms. Roaring, and I was going to save this one, but since we're on this list, could you talk a little bit about this fencing? You know, I understand, and I have some notion, at least from a residential point of view, of what the chain link fence looks like with privacy strips. And my experience is sometimes that looks tacky. But are these strips that are secure in some way? They don't have to be, they won't be broken, you know, readily broken and have to be replaced. What does that look like? You know, if you have an idea.
So I will say this is something that we've looked at for use in a couple of other areas because it is more visually appealing, right? And it is a little bit more affordable to obtain. In terms of that specificity, though, I would defer to Mr. Peckham to provide that response.
Okay.
The slats, the privacy slats are basically woven in through the chain link fence. So if you have a 6 or 8 foot high chain link fence, that's how long the slats are going to be. So they're in and out between the different parts of the chain link fence. So they're not readily broken or removed or otherwise. They're PVC, so they're durable.
Okay.
I'm going to leave this to the facilities committee because it seems like an extremely fine level of detail, but I would hope that you would think about where this fence is, because it does sound like it's not going to be terribly aesthetic, but I will leave it to you to talk about it in committee. I will also add, as I think Vicky did earlier, this is one of those times where the board has worked extremely hard over the last 3 or 4 years to do our work in committee, right? That is where the work should be being done. And that is one of the extreme frustrations of this process, is that right now we're kind of squeeze played, because there should have been this level of detailed conversation at the committee meeting, not here on the board floor. And the facilities committee saw this at the first time today, just like everybody else saw it. And that's why we're kind of waffling about what's committee level and what's board level, is because normally we wouldn't even be seeing this. We would just say, Vicky, what do you think? Did the committee discuss this, and are you guys good? And she would say, yeah, we talked about it and we're good. But because we missed that step, we're stuck here talking about slats and fencing, which is clearly a level of detail that we don't like to do with the whole board. But with that said, are we good to move on to the site work side, saying that generally this seems okay-ish? These were all things that I understand when it says items proposed to accept, and I guess Ms. Roaring, I need you to speak to this. These are items that the district administration and the architect and the construction manager all have a consensus that these are the items that you would propose to be accepted.
That is correct at this time, yes.
Okay. So barring further conversation, I think that everybody feels reasonably good about these things. So let's go on to the next slide, which is the general construction slide. This slide, unlike the last one, has two categories, right? It has the items for discussion or more information, and it has the item proposed to accept. Board colleagues, remember, items proposed to accept is the same as before. These are things that all people involved that have had this conversation kind of think this is a good set of things. Now, there's those physical education flooring. So that's something I know people have been very interested in talking about flooring. We can still ask questions about those, but there's sort of consensus around those. Items for discussion and more information is where they're looking for most board feedback. So board colleagues, who has the first question on this slide? Ms.
Okay, thank you. So I think I lost the number of, is this slide 8? Yeah, okay.
It is Board Member Smith, slide 8,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. My apologies. I just couldn't see it. So it notes a reduction in the acoustical ceiling panels in the building trades and automotive, CTE rooms. Could you just talk a little bit about what this means for students and staff learning in those spaces? And I do note it's a 70% reduction here.
The level of material that we had shown in those rooms was more put in as far as a aesthetic design feature than an acoustical feature. And therefore the reduced amount is an appropriate amount for those classroom functions that they have in there. They are the building trades, auto shop area, so they are noisy, they are to begin with. And just so you know, when they're doing classroom work, if they're talking about theory and stuff like that, there is a separate classroom with a standard acoustical ceiling in it that's associated with each of these spaces. So if the instructor is doing a lecture, they're going into these separate classrooms for that function.
So just a follow up. So I'm just kind of curious why we had that design in the first place, this more costly one, knowing what you just said.
Well, it was just to give the designer that was working on it thought they would look better if that was a more consistent material across the ceiling than having that in part of the ceiling and then just the painted gypsum board in other parts of the ceiling.
Mr. Elmaniawi, did you want to go next?
I just wanted to follow that up because I'm not the expert, but I still am concerned that the noise would be too great and would start, bothering other classes. So is there any way that there could be a test done?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, we got two parts to the things that may be considered acoustical in these spaces. One is to isolate the room and separate it acoustically from spaces around it. And in this case, mainly spaces above it. And that is accomplished by a very special hung 2 layers of gypsum board with insulation ceiling that prevents the noise from transferring from one space to an adjacent space. The part that we're talking about reducing is for absorbing sound within the space. And the part we're reducing really doesn't play a major role in preventing that sound transmission between these spaces and the adjacent spaces.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you for that one too. I appreciate the follow-up.
I have the opposite concern that what about within the classroom and they're shouting over like the machinery and everything?
Well, that's what I'm saying is the reduced amount is still sufficient. In some ways, no matter how much absorption you put in, it's not going to dampen the noise of some of the equipment that's in these spaces. It's not like you're going to be able to have the table saws running at full speed and have a casual conversation to the person next to you. It's just no matter how much sound absorption material you put in a room, you're not going to get to that level. So it's a matter of having an appropriate level of sound absorption based on the use of the space.
I know we keep talking about the floor tile, but this has changed size of porcelain floor tile from 24 by 48 to 12 by 24. Which space or spaces is that in?
In phase 3, the porcelain floor tile is used in the main lobby for the auditorium and the entrance, and in the student visitor or the student and event entrance where we have the scanning areas for people entering the building and the corridor that connects those across. So really just in that front lobby area in phase 3 is where that material is used.
I'm just trying to follow up because I know we've asked this question a couple of times, but some of the spaces that we have right now in phase 1, which is the one we're so familiar with, is that they feel very grand, right? Part of what that sense of grandiosity, I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer, but I feel like some of that comes from those large floor tiles. And I'm just wondering, is that going to feel the same to me as I enter the building, which of course is our most public entrance, right? The grand entrance is what you're talking about, if I understand.
I would tend to agree with you that the larger floor tile do provide, you know, a grander feel for that flooring. I don't disagree with that. Just a question of whether the additional cost for that is something that wants to be factored in.
I understand. Ellen, I think you had a question, Ms. Krejci?
I did, and it's similar to what you were saying, but it's about the exterior glazing, especially that exterior glazing right around the front door and the front lobby, that really added a lot to the grandeur of the building. And especially when you replace that full wall of windows right at the main office near the front entrance to that kind of brick with squares, kind of looks really run of the mill. It really hurts just that main facade of the building. And I'm wondering how much that, like the third floor corridor off to the side, not the third floor corridor, but that thing off to this side, what's it called? The 3-story curtain wall, that's a little less visible, but the main office and third floor corridor and the doors right around that front entrance to the school, it'd be really great if we could get those costs broken down so we could maintain this public image when someone first walks into the school. I'd really like to keep that, if possible. I don't know.
I want to make sure that I'm sorry, Mr. Elmagnawi, go ahead.
I would actually agree with both Ms. Krejci and you, Ann, about the grandiosity of the entrance. If there's a way that we could maintain that, it would be ideal. On another note about this, the windows, the glazing, could you do it on, say, the section that's the blue section and not the forward-facing section, for example?
Yes, I mean, we can, none of this is mutually exclusive. It's not an all or nothing. And there's ways that we can work with any or all of these elements for potential modifications.
Can we go back to that slide with the list on it, Mr. Baker, so that we're sure that we're covering everything? Let's see. Dr. Tatur?
Excuse my ignorance, but what is a furring system? And why is it not required in one case but needed in the other case?
Okay, the furring system is, we have the main studs of the building, or in some cases, it's the main wall is a concrete masonry unit. And for the one item that says eliminate furring system behind masonry veneer not required, the contractor assumed that we needed the furring system there. And really you don't. Typically in a masonry wall, you have a masonry backup wall, then you adhere insulation directly to that backup wall. Then you put your masonry veneer on and you don't need a furring system. When we're doing the things like the metal panels or the fiber cement panels, you build the stud wall, that's your structural exterior wall of the building. And then you need to put insulation on the outside of that. And then you need to attach your metal panels or your fiber cement panels to a furring piece that makes up that distance that you're putting the insulation in there. So you have something to fasten to. And we have a system called Green Girt that we used on phases 1 and 2. And the alternative furring system is something the contractor is proposing that a number of our architects have used when they worked in other offices, and does the same thing. It may be, and we're still waiting for the pricing from the contractor on that one, potentially at a savings for the project.
Ms. Smith?
I have one more. I wanted to ask you about the library. So you've got some substantive changes there, design changes to the library media center.
Wait, Vicki, is this on slide 8?
Well,
trying to just finish.
Doesn't it say media center here or no? I'm sorry.
Yes, the
Does it?
third
Oh,
bullet.
I'm sorry. Change finished material. It does. I'm sorry, Vicki. Go ahead.
Okay, so you've got some substantive changes that you're proposing there, and I understand that these may not be programmatic, but they really change the look of the space. And could you just walk us through one more time some of what you're proposing and what the options might be?
Sure.
And I have to admit, I was getting a little bogged down into color. At first, I was like, okay, I'm not sure I really care about that. But actually, I care about all of that because it does change the way that space will look.
So if we want to go to the slides of that, okay, so this is what currently is in the contractor's bids. And the three main elements are the wood that you see at the far end there, and the ceiling underneath that being wood, that area. And then on the left side there, those white panels, and on the right side, the same white panels on those large walls of a decorative fabricated painted wood panel in those areas to kind of break up and give some character to those walls. And then the alternative is to essentially paint instead of putting the wood on there, and that paint could be in all these options. We've kind of shown a neutral, more monochromatic scheme going there. It could be an accent color, so it draws your eyes there, similar to the way the wood would. And then on the large walls where we had those other panels, to just eliminate those and paint those walls. And like the exterior glazing, these are not mutually exclusive. You could take the panels off the walls and keep the wood. You could keep the wood or change the wood to a painted detail and keep the other white panels on those large walls. So it's not an all or nothing proposition in these proposed changes either.
Mr. Elmanawi, did you have a question about the media center?
More of a comment. I really dislike the removing of the wood. I think it ties into the bookshelves. It makes the place look really nice. However, I really do approve of the removal of the white, those white boards on that large gray wall. Yeah. I think that wall, and this is just where my mind goes. I mean, that's a giant gallery wall. It's a giant wall to hang, flags. It's a giant wall to do a million different things that, to project a movie on, whatever it might be. So I think by putting something on that wall, it actually might limit us in a way that we don't want to be limited. That's all.
I was actually going to say something very similar, especially given the level of creativity and energy that we see out of the Albany High Media Center. The librarians at Albany High are, without a doubt, some of the most energetic and inspiring faculty members that we have. So I was going to add that as well. Although I did notice that they're called, in one of the slides, white acoustical tiles. And I'm wondering a little bit about this space. This space has always concerned me, raised my concern. It's a very, very large space. And I just wonder what the acoustics are going to be like in this space and whether those tiles were providing some sort of function as well as aesthetic.
Those tiles are not really providing an acoustical function. They are not absorptive. They're just basically a MDF board, which would be reflective. But because of the different angles, you'd be more likely to see and have the benefit to panels like that from an acoustical standpoint in a music space where you don't want the reverberation going back and forth across the walls where you're having larger sounds. The panels that are, and the acoustical review that our acoustical consultant did, led us to the acoustical panels that are on the upper part of the wall, the white panels between the windows in the middle of the plan. Yeah, there's where the cursor is. Those that wrap around there are the ones we need for the actual acoustical absorption in the space.
And has that expert been consulted again about whether removing those MDF boards requires us to add acoustic tiles in a similar location at that end of the room, or at the other end?
Well, the acoustical consultant did not ask for those to be there, so they're saying that without those, the space works fine.
And last bit for me on those tiles is I completely agree with Mr. Elmanawi that just looks like a fantastic creative space with those two big walls to have things done to them, on them, with them. But are they going to be useful in that way? Do we need any kind of infrastructure underneath them or on them for hanging and working with to make the walls maintainable over the long haul?
I don't know that I can give you an answer right now. I'd have to think about that more depending on what you were going to use them for. if you're going to hang flags up there and have it be, a relatively permanent display, then that would be one scenario. If you were going to hang artwork up there that was going to change every 3 months, then it might be a different scenario as far as what we would need there to be able to accommodate that.
Well, I don't know what savings we get out of taking the MDF down, but I think we should at least consult with program about what would be useful. Otherwise, it could also be a mural space, right? You could see something painted physically on the wall. There's a lot of interesting things that one could do. I actually have that same question about where the wood is, which I agree looks very nice. It reminds me of First Unitarian. Those of you who've been in there for board presentations and things, it's the same material. I'm almost positive that First Unitarian is clad in the sanctuary. So I'm very familiar with it. And it's beautiful, but it is not something you hang things on, right? It has its own beauty. But if we wanted to be able to allow our librarians to hang things there, do we need to provide some mechanism for them to put, because that's where your eye is going to look as you're looking down the space. Do we need brackets, hooks? I don't know what you need, but something so that they can do programmatic work.
Just, yeah, we'll have to follow up and see if they would hang stuff there. Just one follow up is the wood wall is really the focal point there. Do people feel any differently about the wood ceiling than they do about the wood wall?
Ceiling that we can't see, that's in the lower, where the ceiling is
Right.
a one-story
Right.
level.
If you go forward a few slides, it would be that ceiling, yes.
I'm sorry, where would the ceiling be?
Just if you can flip forward probably another 2 or 3 slides. That is all wood on that ceiling where you enter the library under a 1-story ceiling, past the circulation desk, and then you open up into the larger 2-story space. So
I'm
this
just going to point out that when this picture was taken inside the rendering, it's very high. This is like at the point of view of somebody who's like about 8 feet tall, right? I mean, you're not going to come in with your head brushing the ceiling. So I just don't want people to think that this is going to be that close to your vision. At least as I visualized it, it was still going to be about a 9-foot ceiling. Right?
correct.
I think
maybe
it's needed. Personally speaking, I think this wood ties in with the bookshelves and the tables. So that's my opinion. I don't know if you can get the same kind of color without using wood, or same kind of idea.
It's really kind of tough for me because it actually feels like it's dark in there. But that may not be the reality, but that's what that looks like. Looks like I'm walking under a bridge.
Mr. Peckham, isn't there another one that shows with a white ceiling on there?
That's gray. And then, yeah, that one is what it would look like if there was a white ceiling. And whether that's a white acoustical ceiling or a white chipboard ceiling.
Ms. Krejci, did you want to add something?
I did. Oh, waiting for the mute to come off. I did. I just wanted to speak generally on that library aesthetic. First of all, I think I really like that big plain white space because it becomes a canvas for what our students and our teachers can do with it. The other thing is, well, that wood trim, both in the walls and the ceiling is nice. I think we're really trying to go for continuity and the original grandeur of the design here. And I think whereas what I was talking about with the glazing, you look at a building that's mostly walls of glass and then one part with brick and a few little square windows, that looks weird and jarring. Or the side panels on the classroom doors to have them in one section and not the other. That's a jarring contrast, but I don't think anyone's going to look at a white ceiling and say, gee, I bet this ceiling wasn't white in the original plans. That's, I kind of expect the ceiling to be white, so I don't think eliminating wood from a ceiling is really going to be jarring or distasteful or look cheap to people. I mean, and I agree with Ms. Smith that darkness really, maybe it's intended to make the entrance space be smaller and cozier, but it does seem odd that you're using a dark color to make that space look smaller to me.
Mrs. Adams, Superintendent Adams, did you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to make sure when Vice President Smith said that would look dark, there were other options that were shown. And I couldn't remember if I saw the white or the gray is kind of dark. The white lightens it, but the wood does connect. And so I think it's important for you all to have that discussion as to which way you might want to see it. I think Rich, cost would be important, to know not only the material, but the cost of what we're looking at. So
it sounds like the board may be open to changing this ceiling, but would like some more cost information. So really I see breaking out costs for this for three things: the wood wall, the white panel walls, and then the wood ceiling, and what the cost for each one of those elements might be.
And any increment for whatever we would need to make those spaces useful to the programmatic folks, since if we're going to have them, we should program them. I also just had one little minor, this is just aesthetic, and I hate getting down to this level of detail, but what if we, there's a sunken ceiling. There's a name for that I cannot remember, but there's a big gap in the ceiling where the ceiling suddenly gets higher. What if the trim on that were the wood? Yeah, the recessed ceiling, thank you. What if the trim on the recessed ceiling had the wood to tie in the aesthetic, but the main body of the ceiling were white? That is my brilliant stroke of aesthetic genius there. So see right there, keep those wood panels on the vertical, but never on the horizontal plane.
I like it. I like that idea.
I'm not an architect. I will leave it to the facilities committee, but that's my idea. All right.
And
anything else on Media Center? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Savage, and I think, and maybe this is what I wanted to say at the end, and I think Rich was getting there, but that is, I would like to be able to take all of these sort of elements and cost and options on like one table, much like we did with, in many ways, the 5-year plan, where we had all these sort of choices and we could look at the cost and decide. I think that would be very helpful to have something like that. Because I might, for instance, I think I'm tending to agree with Ellen on the exterior, but if I had to give up the ceiling or that wood panel in the library, I'd have to really think about that, but at least I could see what the cost differential would be.
Ms. Krejci?
I just had a concern about the acoustic tiles, because one of the problems with the current building is that we don't have appropriate acoustic controls. And I know even district-wide, we had to budget for increased acoustic measures at the elementary schools. So I really do want to make sure that we have the acoustic controls we need, especially for something like the Media Center, where you want to be able to have that quiet study environment, even when you have groups of students talking and collaborating. That's my question. Are we going with, I understood Mr. Peckham's response about the tiles in the CTE classrooms, that there'll still be enough to set that noise from going out of the CTE area, but I just want to make sure that eliminating or reducing acoustic tiles will not have a detrimental effect.
I think, as I mentioned before, that those are not providing, in a library media center, you want sound absorption. Those MDF panels on the walls in the media center are not providing sound absorption. So they're taking them out or leaving them in is not going to have any significant difference in the acoustical performance of that space as a media center.
Do I understand that they were there? They were part of the original design for decorative, just for visual interest?
Correct.
I hate to ask, but wasn't that the kind of nice to have stuff that we were supposedly taking out when we brought this project down from 196 million to 179? I'm a little sad to see it still in there if we didn't need it. just a comment, not a question.
Mr. Baker, can you bring us back to slide 8? Wow, that was fast. Well done. So I wanted to, before we move on, I wanted to verify there's certain things that are categorized here as items proposed to accept. Ms. Roaring, does that mean the same thing on this slide that it meant on the slide before? Is this something that that staff is comfortable with all of these things, or do you have more questions about some of these?
There are a couple items shown here that I don't think that have been fully fleshed out. I know we were looking for some additional information on the PE flooring change that's at the bottom rather than at the top. And I know we had asked some additional questions about the alternative furring system, as that would be a deviation from what we've used in phase 1 and phase 2.
Actually, I was going to ask, both of those were on my list of things I wanted to ask about. The furring system in particular, I just wanted to make sure that there's not going to be a maintenance issue or a decrease in longevity there. That seems like a thing that one needs, is the crossbars to attach things to. And so I'm just concerned about taking it out, and sort of like Ellen's last comment, if we really didn't need it, why the heck was it in there in the first place? So taking it out at this late stage of the game feels risky to me.
In the alternative furring system, it is truly that. It's a different type of system to do the same thing. So it's not, it's really just, you buy a Kia or a Hyundai, and one of them may be less expensive than the other for the same type of car, but you may have always bought Kias, so you're going to buy a Kia. That's kind of the thing here, that one will perform just as well as the other.
What about the one where we're eliminating the furring system? That's really the one I was referring to. And I know you spoke about that before, but I'm still confused.
That is really a case where I think we had one detail in our drawings where we showed it there and one detail where we didn't. So the contractor assumed that we wanted it there, but said, if you really don't need it, I can give you a credit back. So
I understand. And the PE flooring, what's the deal? What is the situation with that?
And I agree with Mrs. Roaring. This is one, when we were modifying the presentation this afternoon, that I failed to move to the upper list, that had not been completely vetted, but that is a different manufacturer than what was specified. The contractor is saying they're going to provide almost everything that's what we call the basis of design, which is what we designed around. And they've said that if you can work with this other manufacturer, then we can save some money. But one thing we have to go back and make sure of is that we're not getting, level 1 product from the one manufacturer, level 3 product from the other manufacturer. We got to make sure that they're actually comparable products before we can make a formal recommendation on that.
Okay, so that one needs to move back up to the top. I have one more on item 8 on slide 8, but I know I've asked the last couple. Anybody else with something on slide 8? I don't see a hand. I just wanted to comment about the side lights. It's actually interesting. It's the one thing I heard any negative feedback on at all about phase 1 is I heard some teachers concerned that those side lights provided too much visibility in the terms of a lockdown situation where they felt that it was too hard to get out of sight because of the side lights. I have no idea if that was a valid concern or not, but it is one of the very few negative things I heard about phase 1. So I guess from that perspective and the way that you've said that, and I've seen with my own eyes that teachers do cover them up, I could understand us not adding them in the new, the next phase, if in fact we truly are going to allow teachers to cover them up, because I also know there's some schools don't allow teachers to cover up the side lights. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about those a little bit.
I think that the main rooms where there was a concern and still is a concern, we're addressing it as far as the side lights, is where we have the breakout rooms, which then connect to a classroom, because essentially in those rooms, you've got 2 side lights for every room, which means you have more area of the room that you can see through the side lights. So I think that in the classrooms that are basically along the perimeter, and not along the courtyard side, that we have sufficient area for lockdown purposes in those outside of view of the side lights. But the side lights obviously do create more of an area of a room where you can see in if they're not covered.
Okay, so I don't really feel like I have an ability to summarize this conversation. I think we had a pretty robust conversation about the media center and a couple of other items. So hopefully you have enough to understand the level of detail we'd need to see next in order to make a final decision. I don't really know with this process how we're going to move forward with this process. We should probably, if folks don't mind, just take a brief minute to talk about that. We have a board meeting on July 9th. Is facilities going to meet and review this level of detail prior to that so that we can get back to our more normal process, or will that create too little time if we try and insert a facilities committee meeting in between now and July 9th?
I would like to ask Ms. Roaring and Ms. Demara about that. I personally will be available, and I'd have to check with the committee members, but I would like to ask them as staff who are central to this committee about their availability and whether it's possible to do something during that week or the following week, and whether we would have enough information by then.
So if I might add just a little perspective to that, the 9th is next Thursday. That is the board meeting. It is actually a week away, well, a week and a half away. And remember, this is a short week. And so Monday is a holiday. That means you would only have Tuesday or Wednesday to have a facilities meeting of this detail prior to the July 9th board meeting. We do have a board meeting on the 23rd, which does put a little pressure because this has to be voted on by then. So just to.
So we can vote on it at the 23rd. We don't have to vote on it on the 9th?
Ms. Roaring?
That would be true. I will say we have a little bit of concern about some of the lost time as it pertains to one of the key elements of this phase, which is the rubber gym, just because of the remediation work in there. But we absolutely want to make sure that we're proceeding in the way that is best. And if that means we take a little bit more time, we are going to do that.
Can we split that work off and get it started? Is there a reason it has to wait for the rest of this to catch up?
It is work that is part of the GC contract. So until you award the GC contract, you can't get them started on that work.
Okay. So I guess I would like to maybe propose that we continue this conversation about process tomorrow or tonight or the next day. But I do think we really would all benefit from the facilities committee being able to do their job. And if we really can push to the 23rd without creating a problem for our contractors to be able to start charging us more because their contracts are being let later, if that's what we need to do, then perhaps we ought to do that. Otherwise, we're essentially doing the facilities committee work next week, 10 days from now at the organizing meeting on July 9th, which I don't love. So I guess I'm going to let Ms. Roaring and Ms. Smith talk about that, about whether and how that might be squeezed in. Okay.
Sure. Yes.
Can we go, are we good on the board level conversation on slide 8 then? Are we ready to go on to any other questions in particular, not the pictures, but we go to the very end. There is another slide with numbers. Mechanical items for discussion. Slide 27 is when the details start picking up again. Does anybody have any questions down here that they wanted to ask? Anybody on slide 27? Slide 27, going once. Oh, Dr. Chatur.
Wasn't the Booster Club a big proponent of the concession stand? when all this was going on. I mean, this was something they all voted on, and therefore it was moved into the referendum, into the scope.
We slid forward to slide 28, which is fine because I don't think there was on 27. So, Mr. Baker, if you could just go forward one slide. Mr. Peckham, can you fill us in on the history of this concession stand as best you know?
Right. We're not saying that we're not eliminating proposing to eliminate the concession stand. We're proposing just to bring it back to the budget that we had for the concession stand as part of the referendum. We had done during the schematic design phase, back when we were kind of outlining all 4 phases and fleshing them out some after the vote. We also did some more development of the concession stand and the toilets that were going to be associated with the concession stand for outside use. And that cost was coming in significantly higher than what was carried in the referendum. So what we're just proposing here is to scale that back to what was planned for in the referendum.
Can you just remind us a little bit more? So it's elimination of a bathroom. Is that the biggest difference?
No, the plan that we ended up with was to have a concession structure and a toilet structure, separate structures on 2 different locations on the field, and then an entrance area and plaza in between them. And that's what is driving some of the costs to where they're at. And therefore, if we can scale that back to what was envisioned originally, and from a budgetary standpoint, we can release those funds from phase 4 into phase 3.
So could you just explain what was envisioned originally? Because none of us have, at least I don't have that level of detail in my head.
At the original planning, we had simply said that it was going to be a separate structure that had the concession stand and the toilets in it. And when from design purposes, we looked at the option of splitting it into 2 separate structures, that increases the cost of each structure over what they would be if they were combined, and other aspects of that.
How much work would it be to provide a rendering of the original plan and the proposed?
We can do that in concept. Yep.
Okay, that would be helpful because I'm not really understanding it. And as part of it, I remember there was a thing about the Booster Club. I don't remember anything about the thing, but I remember there was a thing. And so I would like to know what exactly it is that was originally envisioned, what was then proposed, and what we're falling back to, so that I do not wish to, once the steel goes in the ground, that's probably a bad metaphor, but whatever. Once things start getting built, I don't want to hear that that was not what people were expecting. I'd rather be able to show them the pictures. So.
Savage. Yes, when we have, I mean, there are a few things on the list that we had decided to come back to. And one of those other things being the parent drop-off thing. So we have a bit of a running list. So we'll bring that back to facilities if that's okay.
That's great. This one, however, is 680,000 out of the $2 million that we need. So it's
Right.
It's a big one.
Right. I understand that. I just want to suggest we take it there though. Okay.
Love that. And actually, while we're there on this slide, what is this about exterior track work? What is this? I don't know anything about this. Ms. Wilson, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Did you want to say?
I can wait till you're finished. I just had a question on the slide.
Okay, thank you.
So when exterior tracks need periodic maintenance or resurfacing, and this at the schematic design level, we had called for the track to be completely dug out and replaced, which is different than what was estimated pre-referendum, which was just to They mill off the surface and put down a new track surface, similar to the way they mill roads and repave a road. They take off the top surface and then put down a new surface for it, which was what had been estimated by Turner for the pre-referendum scope. And so we're just saying, again, bring that back to the scope that was planned in the referendum.
We're talking about our brand new track, the one that has just been built a couple years ago.
Well, the track was not built when the turf
Oh,
field.
the track is older. The turf field is new.
older
The
than
track.
the turf field. Yes.
Okay, that's what I failed to remember. Okay, got it. Let's see, Ms. Wilson.
So before, I had a question about the concession stand, but before belaboring that, I wanted to ask about the Multa Vista photo documentation and whether there's a way to accomplish that still. Well, basically my question is, since we've been doing it, I'm almost concerned about not doing it in the future phases, although it's a significant savings. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of alternate or a way to still achieve what the photo documentation did, but without that cost.
Probably not to the same level of information. And I know that even when we approached the board about this and the facilities committee about this originally in phase one, they felt that they wanted to make sure that they approved it at that point in time for all 4 phases, so you didn't run into that situation. We just felt that it was worth bringing back up as a potential item, knowing that where we're at with the budget. So, and just a brief description of what it does is that the company comes in and they take photographs of what's above the ceiling before you put ceiling in. So if your maintenance staff ever have to go to repair something, say they get a call, there's a leak in classroom 104. They can pull up the photos and see maybe what's above the ceiling before they even go to see what's there, or if they need to know exactly where a pipe runs under the ground, they can look at that. And then there's pictures taken of the walls before they close them up, so you know where the electric and where everything is in the walls or piping in the walls. So you have all that data for future maintenance purposes is really what one of the large things is designed to do, or if there's ever any claims by the contractor saying certain things were done at a certain time, you have photographic documentation that can help you in those situations. So it is something that's difficult to get that same level of information in another format.
I will say that I have a hard time with this one. I was fully persuaded of the value of this when we added it in a couple of years ago. It's pretty hard for me to envision us not doing this. It just seems, and I will take recommendations from staff and from committee, but it just seems penny wise and pound foolish to not have this. It could cost us so much more money if there was litigation and we didn't have this documentation, or if there was a problem behind the wall that we couldn't see. It's very hard for me to imagine giving this up. Ms. Krejci, did you want to follow up?
I just wanted to totally agree to what you were saying. I was disturbed to see this one on the list for elimination. It's precisely because of all these changes that this is critical. If we only have it for the first 2 stages and then we stop, we're not going to know what's there, because 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be impossible to go back and look back through where changes were made. People are not going to be able to look through change orders from 30 years ago and figure out what's what. For $132,000, having that peace of mind to be able to know exactly what is where, that is so worth it, I think.
Michelle Miawi?
Question regarding this photo documentation. So that carries on to the renovation of the existing high school, correct? Yeah, I mean, I think a while ago, speaking to Ms. Roaring about asset mapping and asset keeping track of our assets better, I think this is so important, especially with the renovation side, because we really don't know what's going on over there. The new stuff, I mean, I would say it's more important to do this with the old side of the building than the new side of the building. And to stop this now would be silly.
$132,000, but silly nonetheless. I tend to agree. Okay, Tabitha, I think you had something you wanted to say about the concession stand, didn't you? Wasn't there something you wanted to go back on there?
Well, just not, I know that we're taking it to our committee, but I think it's just basically almost like it's less of a question, more of a comment, that it just shows how many different stakeholders were involved in this process. And rather than even call them stakeholders, I would say even, like, for lack of a better term, interest groups, everybody from every corner, whether it be music or arts, or in this case, the Booster Club, everyone had a stake in this process. And that's why it's so important for us, like, to have the level of detail that we're getting today, like in facilities, because I do appreciate the reports we get, but I do want to do that work there, back to reiterate your point, and double down there, so that when we come to this point, it's more of, just an update that we get from our committee chair.
Dr. Chatur, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to confirm, that 132,000 is for both phase 3 and phase 4 photo documentation, right?
Correct.
So at $66,000 a phase, I think it's, well, sorry about the mute. At $66,000 a phase, I mean, especially with this phase 3, we're going into an older building, knowing all the problems we had when that building was built, it is necessary to have that kind of information. Who knows what we're going to find.
That was a very important point. 1974 was not a good year for building this building. Yeah.
Madam President,
Mrs. Adams.
I would just say that I agree, because I think the things that we are experiencing now, it goes back to how do we prevent them from happening in the future? And to be able to have that photo documentation, it would absolutely help. Even, beyond all of us being here, you would still have that documentation. And we struggle with that. And I think you guys know, we have struggled even when we've gone back to look at things, and it's, well, where are these plans? Where are those plans? And how do you match up this plan with this plan to know what you're trying to do? Even when it just comes to basic maintenance. I always think about the call before you dig. Okay, so who really has the plan for me to call before I dig? Well, this is that same thing. We would have our own plan, so we would be able to call before we dig, but we can call ourselves and have that information so that we would know, and it would be readily available.
Thank you very much. Anything else on this slide 28? Otherwise, the next slide is just math, right? So Mr. Baker, if you just take us forward one slide, this is just math, right? Total bids, contingency, contract, math. So we've got this. Let's move forward to one more slide. There's a couple new things on here that when Mr. Peckham went through it, he noted that there were some things. This is not simply a summary of everything before. There's a couple things on here that were not mentioned above. And so if anybody has any questions about things that are on this slide, but they had not had the opportunity to ask questions about before, now would be a good time. Any questions here about anything on this slide? I think the obvious one that you mentioned, Mr. Peckham, was the furniture, fixture, and equipment. One of the most important things I think that we are trying to figure out how to do, despite the $2 million savings needed, is to make sure that there's no question that the children who are in whatever academy or academies that are in phase 3 and 4, I guess it's mostly phase 4, and the other facilities in phase 3, that they have the same quality materials as in the phase 1 and phase 2 work. So I guess that's what I just wanted to push a little bit on, is when you talk about a reduction in furniture, fixtures, and equipment, is that just because you have excess budget there, even anticipating using the same exact furniture, fixtures, and equipment throughout phase 3 and phase 4, or is something else happening?
Currently, it's because we're showing that approximately that amount of excess budget. We are in the process of going through and making sure that we have everything covered. Working with Mrs. Roaring, we determined that there are some things that the district's going to want to purchase out of that budget that we've got to make sure are accommodated. That may not be in there at the current time. But at the same time, we've been talking about, we don't necessarily have to provide the exact same teacher's desk in all 4 phases as long as we're providing new appropriate teacher's desk. As an example, if there's something else that's at a different price point that provides the same functionality and relative aesthetic for the project.
I guess I would want to have real confidence in that before we ate this $500,000. Like, I would want our programmatic staff, whoever gets to make these decisions, principal, superintendent, somebody, to actually visualize this alternative item that you think is going to be the same but cost less. That sounds to me optimistic in my experience. I rarely have things cost less but turn out to be just as good. So I guess I know we're on a bit of a time crunch here, but that's when I'm personally feeling very uncomfortable with making that decision without actual physical samples.
Duly noted.
Of course, we need to come up with $2 million somehow, somewhere. So I know that our choices are fairly limited at this point, but that's one that makes me pretty nervous. Anyone else for anything on this slide? Okay, I think the next slide is really a processy slide, which we kind of jumped ahead and talked about a little bit, that we're going to try and insert, if possible, the facilities committee meeting here on here. And despite the fact that this slide says target contract submission to BOE on July 7th for consideration on July 9th, I get the sense that, in fact, we could slip to July 23rd without impacting our relationship with contractors. I want to make sure we understand that, because we definitely don't want to impact our relationship with contractors and have anybody pull out or expect to have a escalation or something because we slipped. So that would need to be considered fully.
I think we just need to make sure that and Ms. Roaring, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on where we are timeline-wise, we can go no later than the 23rd. It has to be decided on then.
I agree with that. And I think Ms. Smith and I will be having a conversation very soon to kind of iron out some of those next steps for the committee and getting something on the calendar.
Yes, ma'am, we will.
Okay. Board colleagues, any last questions or statements or commentary that you wanted to add into this conversation? Mr. Almignawi.
Can we just go one slide back and scroll down all the way? So the overage, can you just help me understand why we have that? I mean, is that just, did you put this together so we can take our pick and then maintain this roughly 300,000 that we can kind of play with?
This was just to put together, if we took and if the board was in agreement with everything we put on the list and we accepted it all, what were we projecting to be? So then we'd be saying that we'd be entering the project approximately $300,000 under budget. So essentially, if we're not doing the multi-vista reduction, that seemed to be a pretty definitive one. And there's some other ones that seem pretty definitive. And then there's some in here that we'll go back and have to fine tune some costs. So we've got some work to do, and that's our charge, to work with the committee now to flesh out some more of the details and answer more questions so that we can get this to a contract award within budget.
And
Just
I just want, before you speak, I just want to ask Mr. Baker to go back one more slide because I want to make sure everybody, especially folks listening at home, understand this particular piece. We're not budgeting Albany High down to the $300,000 mark. Built into that math is a 7.2% contingency of $3.3 million. So there's $3.3 million of, oh my gosh, we opened the wall and the steel is corroded, right? There's extra money baked in. This is the 300,000 is just to bring the known work back into budget. Does that make sense? Everybody's clear on that? So there's two kinds of money. The 3.3 is not going anywhere, although of course it would be a proposal. Someone could propose that instead of a 7.2% construction contingency, we go into it with a 7% construction contingency and gain a little bit of money back. The risk on that, as I know we all know, is that this is a renovation project. And while phase one was a big hole in the ground, and that also has its own kinds of risks, we know that the construction quality of Albany High was not good. We are very aware of the challenges, which were just highlighted in the Times-Union not that long ago, of the way that they had to switch. I think both architect and contractor, they switched in the middle of the project, resulting in a lot of changes. So things are not as they should be inside the walls at Albany High. The good news is we weren't planning to use much of what was inside the walls, right? We were pretty much planning to use the structural elements. So did that answer your question, Mr. Almanyawi? Did you want to ask something else?
I did have another question, specifically about multi-vista reduction. So is that a contractual 132,000? So there's no wiggle room in there.
You mean as far as
reworking those numbers to be less? I mean, I don't know how else to put it other than saying, could you guys do this work for less?
I mean, anything's possible, but I would say that those are what we've signed contracts for to do the work. And if we have to go back to the vendor and say, if you can't do it for less, we may take it all away. But
Exactly. But that was just a thought. Thank you so much.
Well, you could also look at the scope, right? Say we want pictures of the electrical, we want pictures of the plumbing. Well, do we need pictures of the stairs? Maybe not. Those kind of scopes could be adjusted, I guess.
Anyone else? Any last commentary, thoughts? I'm just making sure that I'm on the right agenda here because I think I get to ask the magic words, but I want to make sure I've been on several different agendas tonight and I want to make sure I'm on the right one here. Oh yes, I do get to say the magic words. If no one has any, oh, Ms. Wilson, are you just motioning or do you have a question? And I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Wilson, second by Ms. Smith. All in favor of adjourning? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Peckham, for all of your details on this. It's very helpful and educational.
Thank you, Rich.
Good night, Mrs. Adams, Superintendent Adams.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night.